We have talked about Russians smoking carelessly, but this time you won't believe what they smoked. This wasn't cigarettes. Russians smoked extremely carelessly, but this was a ginormous cigar. It happened around this area on the map right here, and let's look at the photos. What is the outcome? The settlement was Rehi, and it was the railway station, and it was one of the biggest Russian logistical and supply hubs destroyed by the Ukrainians so far in this war. Look at this kaboom. I mean, what kind of a cigar do you have to smoke, and how carelessly to make a kaboom like that? It is estimated that about 50 Russian soldiers were in the vicinity, and 50 is the number to be estimated Russian K.I.As. With explosions so big, they don't need to be near you to be lethal. There's the shockwave, there's the debris, there's this huge sound, and the difference of pressure in the air, it's all damaging to the human body. Here we can see the railway station before the explosion, and this is after the explosion. It was almost leveled. None of the buildings can be used anymore, and the explosion, I am sure, is going to be picked up by Western countries' seismic activity monitors. It was so big you definitely can't detect it from another country. Here's a sideways look to the buildings. They were filled with probably Russian ammunition. I wouldn't be surprised if there was also some fertilizer in them, because this area, Rehi, southern Kherson region, was very big on agriculture before the war. And since this being a logistical hub before the war for civilian agriculture, I guess they were also holding fertilizer here next to huge amounts of Russian ammunition. And we're gonna go into later how big of an amount it was. This entire area has been leveled. And since we all know Russians are dependent on rails for their logistics to work at all, this is a rail right here, I mean, this knocks them back quite a bit. Down here is Crimea, up there is the front, and this is Rehi right here, and the line is of course a railway. It's 110 kilometers from the front, so very far away. The only thing it could have been is a Ukrainian kamikaze drone or a storm shadow, but looking at the explosion, I think it was the storm shadow. Would the Ukrainians use a 2 million plus pound? You corrected me in the last video, I said 2 million United States dollars. It's a British development, so 2 million pounds worth of storm shadow for a logistical center. Well, it depends how much ammunition is there, doesn't it? On this photo, yeah, Rehi is here, but these are the other huge Russian logistical warehouses, and Ukraine has been striking them. Although the counteroffensive has started, Ukraine has not used their main reserves, as we know. Some sources are suggesting that Ukraine has 12 brigades trained, ready to go into the fight, and Ukraine so far has been using 3 of them on the entire front. So they have 9 brigades in the reserve still, and they're striking enemy logistics right now, meaning before they push these main reserves in, they're going to level the logistical centers of Russia in these settlements. We know Bakhmut and Melitopol have been leveled. Anything that is the Russian logistics in those settlements here is gone. Ukraine has been working on them for months. Rehi is a new one, and these two on the coastline, Lazurna and Skadovsk, they have not been hit at all. And Bryansk also needs some working. Somebody filmed a video from the side of it, and they told and commented on the video that explosions continued non-stop for 5 hours. It was a massive amount of explosives there. Destroying these logistical centers in the Russian rear is much more important than destroying Russian armor in the front line, because the armor only depends on ammunition and fuel. If that doesn't come in, the armor doesn't work, it has no effect on the front. So if you take away the logistics, you kinda already destroy the armor. They cannot do anything with it. That is why Ukraine is pushing their most expensive and effective weapons like Storm Shadow to destroy such huge logistical ammunition warehouses, ammunition depots. As Tender put it in Twitter, this has a more greater effect than destroying an entire Russian battalion of armored vehicles. This does more, and I do agree. My friends, would you be so bold to carelessly smoke inside a tank, a T-54, let's say, which it was, filled with 6 tons of explosives? You heard me correct, 6 tons. Would you be so bold to smoke in that tank? If you're not that bold, you don't have a drop of Russian blood in you. The white smudge you see right here, this is not the flame explosion. This is a shockwave. I'm not kidding you, this is the air shockwave. That's how big the explosion was. The tank is right here. You cannot see it because the shockwave takes most of the screen. This was a Russian T-54 turned into remote controlled mine. They filled it with 6 tons of explosives and sent it to Ukrainian lines. But 100 meters before the Ukrainian lines, Ukrainians knocked it out. Not cold, very hot. It went kaboom on a grand scale. I have not seen explosion this big on the front line before. This is a moment later. This white hue you see right here, that's the shock wave expanding. That is the air. You can see it so clearly like that. And that small yellow dot here, that is a huge flame explosion. The tank is a small dot in here. Ukrainians knocked it out with an RPG. All it took, one RPG, to send this huge 6-ton mine into the space. I guess the Russians planned to blow a hole into Ukrainian defensive lines with it. In this video we can see a Ukrainian, actually it's Soviet, UR-77 Meteorite. It's a mine-clearing vehicle that shoots out this meteorite, as the Russians call it, shoots out this wire filled with explosions. I'm sure you know the American equivalent of that vehicle. And in this video we can see it. This here is the vehicle. This is the smoke coming from the shot. And here the explosion starts. This belt right here obviously has Russian positions in it. And this area right here is mined. This is happening during an offensive operation. We're witnessing how the mine clearing works. Ukrainian troops will be closing in from this direction and they will be very carefully following this narrow path right here. I mean, all of this area is filled with anti-armor mines. You don't want to go there. That's the second phase of the explosion. It goes bigger, kaboom. Ukraine is not supposed to have these vehicles. By my reckoning, they didn't have any when the war started. But remember Izium? Of course you do, the Kharkiv offensive. Ukraine went into that offensive and came out with 16 and plus 16 or 17 of those UR-77 Meteorites. Captured from the Russians, now being used on the Russian lines. We can take apart this situation. Why is it so difficult to breach Russian mines and defensive positions while under fire? Russians have trenches all across this forest belt and here also. The fire coming in and the anti-tank fire also is concentrated on this one vehicle or the vehicles crossing through this cleared area. You cannot cross anywhere else because there will be mines, so even if this mine clearing vehicle will not be destroyed, the next ones might be. And then Ukrainians breach into this wood line and they start clearing it up, both sides, position by position. Here's the final stage of that explosion. And that's what the vehicle looks like. I mean, that's a Russian one, of course. It does shoot like a string. Like, the string goes, lands and kaboom! Russian mines were smoking carelessly. My friends, in this video I saw something incredible. Ukrainian T-64, the Ukrainian modified tank. This is an assault on Russian positions. Do you notice this little smudge, the black smudge coming out of Russian positions? And this is a machine gun barrel that Ukrainian soldier was not using throughout this entire segment. He was not shooting at this little smudge. Well, it's a Russian soldier with an RPG. Shooting like that. That's the propelled grenade right here. And it narrowly misses the tank. It's like half a meter. This tank just got itself another day to fight. But wait, that's not it. Right when I thought, oh, they missed, the RPG missed their fight, now they're gonna assault the positions. Oh, did you notice this black smudge right here? Another Russian soldier with an RPG. Damn it, I hate when it happens. Shot the RPG. Here's the propellant. Well, this one hits, unfortunately. It goes straight into the tank. We do know that the crew was fine. Well, of RPG is not going to destroy a tank, but it has a very strong capability to make it immobile. According to the reports, this tank is now in repairs and will be returning to the battle. The part that a lot of viewers don't understand is that RPG, the most basic, mass-produced and cheapest anti-tank rocket-propelled grenade, that weapon can take out even an Abrams tank. I mean, this T-64 had reactive armor, and this one RPG damaged it enough for it to have to leave the battle. Of course, the crew was fine. I mean, if you shoot an RPG against Abrams tank 5-6 times to the tracks, it's immobile and can be destroyed. Of course, Abrams has a reactive armor, a very good one. I'm sure it can withstand 4 to 5 blasts, but you can't take it down with it if you hammer it enough. I see some people think that oh, RPG is so weak and mass-produced, it cannot take down a tank. It can. It takes down any tank in the world if you're persistent with it. We have new satellite images about Russian fortifications in Crimea. And I will use these Crimean fortifications to illustrate what the southern front fortifications look like, because they're identical. How difficult it will be for Ukraine to penetrate these. You see this? Before the fortifications, after the fortifications. Two defensive lines, one in the front and one in the back, and they're connected with these sub-trenches right here. Each and every one of these lines have to be cleared individually by small arms fire and grenades. It's very casualty heavy work. Same here, without fortifications. Fortifications. The first frontal trench, sub-trenches to the back, and the back trench. And as you can see, settlements, some settlements have a trench on the side that they're expecting the Ukrainian attack from. Some settlements have this trench all the way around. And you cannot cross these trenches with tanks. They're wide enough for them to have to be filled. And that takes some time. If you have the proper tank with the proper equipment in front, you can fill it with seconds. But if that tank is destroyed, it's again problems. Again, without defensive lines, with defensive lines. Although there is a water boiler right here, they even digged one behind it, expecting an assault over the water body. There's a huge tank ditch right here. There are lines over here. Without fortifications, fortifications. As we can see, ditches here, ditches here, ditches here, ditches here, trenches right here. These forest belts next to the roads, they're always filled with foxholes and Russian positions. Liberating those, you just have to clear them one by going sideways. Now, my friends, we will look at even the most minor changes on the front line. Some settlements liberated, some Russian positions captured. Let's immediately zoom into Rehi front. Rehi front, there's these two offensive directions. One diagonally down to Vasilivka and another one Tokmak axis south from Rehi to the Tokmak direction. You have all heard the good news. Pyatykhatky, this settlement right here, was liberated. The Russians were kicked out, they were overrun, and there's a lot of K.I.As coming from that settlement. Now, the way I pronounce Ukrainian names, I'm sorry for it. Some of the commentators say that they pronounced them wrong and they thought I pronounced them right. No, I pronounced them wrong, only I pronounced them differently wrong than you. Pyatykhatky, I have no idea. Russian deputy commander of the Storm Ossetia battle was holding this settlement with his troops. The entire battalion was wounded and 300 of them were K.I.As. The entire battalion is knocked out of battle. They're unable to fight. And the commander Dechov Ivengo was K.I.A. in this settlement. Right now, Ukrainians are preparing to assault to Serepyanki. Fighting is going on right on the settlement. Following the road, we can see it leads to Vasilivka, which is the main prize. We have reports of Russian bringing in a lot of armor and a lot of artillery systems. We're talking about also TOS-1 and TOS-2 systems and tanks to fortify this area. Now let's go to Zaporozhye axis or Velika Novosilka axis, however you want to call it. This map doesn't show it, but the latest reports are that the Rivna Pil has been abandoned by the Russians. On two sides of it, Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back, and Rivna Pil would face surrounding if they don't pull back, and Russians have this habit of pulling back before getting surrounded. So in the next few days we might expect Ukrainians liberating Rivna Pil. Southeast from Makarivka, fighting is happening on the outskirts of Urozhaine, this settlement right here. Ukrainians are conducting attacks onto this settlement. Now let's go to Avdiivka. As you can see, I'm zooming into very many different locations already. Ukrainian probing forces are probing everywhere. There's battle going on all across the front. North, south, Donetsk, everywhere. As you can see, north from Avdiivka, Ukrainian forces have liberated these positions right here. We have forest belts, we have roads. And these forest belts, if you see any of those, you can be sure Russians have foxholes and positions in them. Best way to shoot out from, because the trees are keeping you hidden and quite difficult to liberate. We can expect Russians in the near future to pull back from Krasnokharivka, otherwise again there is a threat of surrounding that settlement. Now let's go to an axis I haven't zoomed into like a year. Some big fighting here was happening 1 year ago. It's Severodonetsk, this settlement right here. Small positional battles of course have been happening, but nothing as big as right now. To the east of Bilokharivka, the Russians are actually striking Ukrainian positions with aviation and infantry. They tried. Russian goal obviously is to get a hold of this industrial zone. You can see it right here on this map very clearly. Actually, it's a grey area. Ukrainians are pushing them back. So far we have no reports of Russian success. If Russians occupy this industrial zone, this is a foothold to the settlement of Pyatykhatky. And now, my friends, let's go to Bakhmut axis, and south from Bakhmut, Ukrainians have gained ground. This is south from Bakhmut. This area right here was gained by the Ukrainians 2 days ago. These forest belts all filled with Russian positions, and I'm sure these fields also had Russian trenches and anti-armored ditches in them. Well, they have been overrun. Of course, the goal for Ukrainians is the settlement of Klishchivka, and they're slowly pushing towards it. Also, they're pushing from south of Klishchivka. Russian pattern is if there's a settlement and both sides of the settlement are pushed back, then the troops in the settlement will of course pull back. They don't tend to fight like the Ukrainians fought in Bakhmut, or like they're fighting in Avdiivka, where both of the sides, I mean, this settlement faces surrounding, but Ukrainians are holding on successfully. Russians don't do that. It's time for me to put on my cool hat. This is a Ukrainian trident hat, and look at this shirt. With love from Ukraine, with a cool drone dropping a nade on a Russian tank, that tank turret going to the moon. If you want a cool design shirt like this, estoniasoldier.com is in the description below. Best designs made by you guys. They're your designs. Put on shirts, show your support for Ukraine, get one for yourself and one for your grandmother. I'm sure she'll love it. Disclaimer, this hat has these custom tears on it, so it looks worn, it looks like rustic. I liked it, but some of you have said, oh, I don't want these tears on my hat. It looks really awesome, honestly. My friends, it's time to thank the patrons. In the last video, there was a Polish name that really twisted my tongue. I see that name in my dreams. It's the Nightmares. It was a long, unpronounceable name. If you're a patron tier 10 or above, I'll be butchering your name. Let's go. T. Krisli, Steve Matteus. Oh, American names so easy to pronounce, I'm glad. Ennar, Tail Stoll, Tiki Ricardo. Thank you to each and every one of you 5 people. If you enjoy my videos, my friends, and you like these compact updates about the war in Ukraine, my Twitter account offers the same thing. 3 times a day, the most important news about Ukraine. Link is in the description below. As well as Instagram. You can follow me and keep an eye on my life. I'll see you there. And until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini.